Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Seidelman, and I am here today with Steph Lagana, who is an amazing and mystical human who I've gotten to know. She helped me last year when I was launching, and I have a copy here, the book of Beasties, because sometimes when you're a highly sensitive and soulful sort of creative and you have to do something like market something like a book or something you created or a group or something you want to invite others to do, you can get your undies in a bit of a bundle. At least I have. And so I called upon Steph because I had the sense that she understood me and what I needed, and she did. She helped me to get lined up with that. So Steph, hello, welcome.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here, and I hope to be the mistress of unbundling underwear for everyone involved.
Yes. And Steph has this amazing group, which is on Facebook for kind of, I would say, spiritual creatives and entrepreneurs, healers. Who else would you list in your group?
It's definitely primarily entrepreneurs and creatives. And I think if you have something inside of you and you feel magnetized to this kind of energy, just show up and see what happens. Pop in for a spell.
And people who are seeking a soulful way and a good way that feels good to them to share their work and to build their business in a way that doesn't feel like the old way, the old paradigm of like tricking people or doing it in a way that doesn't feel good. So Steph, tell us, I am fascinated by your story because you used to work in the military. In fact, you were in Afghanistan. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so I used to work for the government. I supported national security for 11 years, and I supported the military. I was a government employee, not a member of the military, and I like to make that clear. But you and I both have these weird stories, which I love how there's this parallel of we were in this very socially acceptable and even prized kind of career.
Oh, yes.
And then something weird happened. And for me, it was going to Afghanistan. And I came back. And it was kind of like my life fell apart in order to come together, and everything looked really good on the outside. I had all sorts of sexy achievements, and I have medals upstairs in my office and all sorts of delightful things that are kind of the dinner plates, badges of honor. And it was kind of the breakdown to break through, because after I came back from Afghanistan, the only thing that I was really sure of was how angry I was and how things seemed to be off kilter for me. And it felt like that was the only thing that was going to happen. Like I just didn't see any other way, even through success, buying a house, getting married, any other like badges of social honor. I just didn't feel like I could find the happiness inside of me anymore. There was only anger. And I didn't realize any of this. It was all beyond words because I didn't have any tools. Like there was no emotional fluency. There was no like self-awareness. I think of it as like a self-literacy. And I didn't realize any of these things. I just knew that I was in a lot of pain, and people didn't get it. I actually had one of my coworkers that thought that I stayed in a hotel while I was in Afghanistan, which is not the case. But she thought that I was like.
Where did you stay in Afghanistan?
In barracks. I was actually in an area where there was a fairly sizable contingent of people, military, government, contractors. But I was lucky to be in a building because there were a lot of people that were in tents, on cots, in sleeping bags, which is often the case when you're in a war zone and things are being set up. So it was kind of this weird, isolating experience that was really intense that people see on television shows and movies. And they don't know how to relate to. And so on the one hand, what I found was that people kind of put me on a stage like, oh, you had this incredible experience. And that was removing me from being in connection with them. And they wanted a lot from me. Like at the time, they wanted everything to be the same. The person that I came back as to be the person that I left as. And they also I had good friends that hid things from me. Like I had a friend that got engaged and I didn't find out about it until I came back because she didn't want to share it while I was gone. She didn't want me to feel left out. And then that made me feel left behind. So yeah, it was this kind of massive disgruntlement.
So how did you get out of that? Because obviously you're in a totally different
I
place
know,
now.
it's so weird. I'm not like, there's no badge that governs my life. I'm not always working in an air-conditioned box, and I can actually tell people what I do. Yeah, it was a very magical, like illogical jump. I found myself on a page looking at a life coach training program, and all that I knew was it sounded good and anything was better than what I was feeling. So I can recreate it as this kind of like mythos and talk about it as like this very sexy, I went from this deep valley of pain in Afghanistan and then I found life coaching and it's transformed my life. But really, it was a goddamn mess. Like when I
Yeah.
was in the middle of it.
And it's not that simple. I think that it's very hard it's like the hero's journey. It's wonderful when you get back and you can report how good things are and you learn something powerful, but it's sometimes very difficult to put into a short series of words what happened.
For real. Yeah. And like created as this chapter, like I was broken and I was in pain, and then mythologizing it. Like, and then I found my solution. It's like in the middle of it, I was completely fucking falling apart.
Yeah.
And looking backwards, it all makes sense. But while I was in it, it was an ungeometric mess. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you made it through all that to create this, what you do now, which in this Facebook group that I've been invited to be part of because of our connection, it's like I've seen how, everybody's just really supporting each other and people are asking questions and challenging themselves and putting themselves out there. Because I think if you're a soulful, creative, entrepreneurial human wanting to share your work in the world in a sensitive, caring way that feels good to you, it's scary. I mean, it's like a lot of us are scared to put ourselves out there. And what I see is like all this connection and you're supporting people and challenging them to do things. So if somebody came to you and said, I'm stuck in this dead-end job, and what I really love to do is, make magical kombucha and deliver it to people in their homes or something like that. But I'm terrified it's not going to work because, I've seen all these other businesses fail, or I've been a failure in the past, or whatever. We all have our stories, why it won't work. How do you approach, what do you think is key to supporting a soulful entrepreneur? What questions should they ask themselves?
Yeah, there's a lot here. I'm really excited to talk about this. So if I start to go into like fighter jet mode, going a few thousand miles an hour, just like slow me down.
It's all good.
Or like poke where clarification is needed. I think one of the most important things that I want to point out is just how easily we can drop from simple, clear courses of action into deep complexity. And it's not because the situations require like that level of sophistication. It's because I believe we create complexity in order to buffer ourselves from vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and soul-led work is the most vulnerability-inducing Goram thing. So the tendency that I see in the people that I attract and the audience that I support is to take what could be very simple things and to make it wildly complicated, which then allows you to kind of fall into a puddle on the couch or not to do anything at all. And so...
So like, for example, like you start thinking, well, I want to say something, and then you think, oh my gosh, or I have something to share, and then you turn it into, oh my God, like I should write that into a blog post. Oh my God, it should be a book. And then pretty soon you're like, I don't know how to write a book. Like something like that. Is that an example of that? I mean, that's what I'm kind of thinking for myself.
For sure.
Or and I shouldn't share it. I should sell it or whatever instead of just sharing it.
Yep. And then like 6 hours later, your elbows hurt and you're like deep in the well of Canva creating graphics. Like, how did this go from this like wonderful good thing into, my eyeballs hurt and I haven't had a glass of water in 3 hours? It escalates quickly.
What are your tips for keeping it simple? Like, how do you catch yourself in that first impulse, which is that's the soul impulse comes and then the brain comes in and...
Yeah. That sparkly energy that you talk about is totally the like really heart-led space, the soul-led impulse. So one of the ways is that you can get support because it's hard to trust your brain. So come into my Facebook group, but also be onto yourself when you are trying to do something that's very simple, and you try to go into like the 5-year plan or the corporate strategy. So like if you wanted to make kombucha, maybe you make a batch for yourself and you see what it tastes like. And then maybe you serve it at your birthday party or to your kids.
Love that. Yes, this is so great. And meanwhile, you're having fun and you're actually exposing people to your joy and your kombucha potentially if somebody's invited to the party. Yeah, like starting where you're at instead of letting all that, those structures, they will suck the life out of you.
Yeah, it kills the fun. And for a lot of people, it's just some sort of like overreach from whatever the corporate crud was that they were last in. They'll take the suck from their last job and they'll start to overlay that on their soul-led business. Ooh. And it sucks.
Yeah. And I imagine that comes from too, is like overlaid with old trauma from work. And like from maybe previous work experiences, which I've written about extensively myself. And I know part of your groups, you encourage people to seek out and sometimes supply in your groups healing work for people so that they can work through things in a more like in a sacred space versus trying to like logically figure it out.
For sure. Because what I found before I encountered coaching was, I didn't think that emotions were important. They were like an accessory feature instead of an integral part of my operating system, which I now see as false and harmful. But the other thing was I just thought that I could believe all of my thoughts. And now I see that there are critical voices at times, and also voices that aren't mine, whether it's from well-intentioned caregivers, grandparents, like people going back in your lineage, people's voices that show up that aren't yours. And they can be really intentioned and still be damaging. Like, voices that want you to seek safety instead of your joy. Well, when you're in a space where you're miserable and you're longing for your purpose, seeking safety instead of joy might be something that could cause more harm than good. Most of the people that are drawn to me, it does. So yeah, small steps, minimum viable product. How can you start and get the energy out really quickly? Because what I found is if you don't unlock that energy, it starts to eat away at you, and it's acidic. It can be really caustic.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. I've had this idea that keeps churning around, like to do a daily inspiration book. And then my brain gets all caught up in like, nobody's going to want to buy it, whatever, all that mental chatter. And I decided finally to take some action. And I think that's what you're all about, is helping people to step into inspired action, which I think is when you're ready and you're healed and you're feeling good enough to take a little action, that's good. But I started a 100 Days project, which you're probably familiar with those, to just get myself doing it in a sweet and easy way that feels fun to me, without the commitment of, oh my God, this has to be a book. It has to be something so hard that I've got to sell and figure out how to write a proposal for. And
I love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Because there's this tendency, and it's like this inflammation effect where the idea comes through and then you need to put up like a whole bunch of like cobwebs around it. And how do I produce it and corporatize it and monetize it? It's like, look, you haven't even written a goddamn word. Like, why don't you start to write, and then you can figure out who the fucking publisher is going to be, or you can let the idea drop in, or the magical connection happen. The other thing that I want to say is that the work that I do with soul-led business, one of my like guiding principles is, we are being guided to do such big things. If we saw the whole landscape of where we were going to go, we would, 1, be terrified, and 2, be exhausted. So we're just being given little morsels at a time, and that's for our well-being. So don't force the plan, because the plan's going to come through. Show up what you're being called to do right now, today. It might be lunch. It might be like, go for a walk and recalibrate your energy. Let the trees balance you out. And that way you can be creative, or have some water, because we're all dehydrated.
So true. And I love that you use, we really share this, like omens and, like whether it's beasties that are crossing your path. Because I tell you, that was one of the most That's a really great way to let your soul lead you in whatever it is you're creating, is just ask what is showing up, and then explore whether it's a beastie or it's a dream element, or you see a billboard that, just gobsmacks you and you're like, why does it say fill her up? Like, what does that mean? Like, just to be curious, why am I so drawn to that? What does it mean? Because I think when we really open up to if it's a kind universe, and the universe is constantly sort of talking back to us, which is what I've kind of grown to believe, like, what is it how is it trying to help us today?
Yeah, that, in like size 72 font, like all over the place. I want that message everywhere. And what I've noticed is I just interact with so many people that have this magic like activating inside of them or activated. And what I want to reinforce in a really big way, because I've worked with hundreds of people and I've been doing this very intensively for a period of time. And I've seen a lot of people in a lot of different spaces, including spaces you'd never expect this sort of stuff to show up. Magic doesn't stop at the borders of your business. Like, you can be led and guided in this deep way. I do all these guided visualizations as a part of my work, and one of them is connecting people with the divine program manager. Like, you can literally allow the beasties, you can allow yourself to be led and guided in this really rich and peaceful way. This hustle and grind stuff is old paradigm energy. You don't have to be available for it in order to grow a business that's thriving. You don't have to subscribe to those rules. And I actually think it's much more effective, and see that it's much more effective if you carve your own path through those new energy guidelines, like really allowing yourself to rest and to play and let the energy come through that way, instead of having to, I guess it's like running up a building.
Yeah.
On the outside.
So exhausting to the other way. And I think it's like because we're just marinating. If you're on social media, you are marinating in this world where it is like, it's hard to keep remembering, I got to go back to my spirit animals, because like, this is hardcore. And I know, whether it's guided visualizations and you're connecting to your higher self, or whether for me, I do a lot of teaching with people to connect with their spirit animals or their spirits in human form. And I know you have your own spiritual team that you work with to help your clients and yourself. I always feel lighter. I always feel relief. I always experience a deep sense of peace, whatever the wisdom is that they share and the instructions. I mean, I find they don't tell you exactly what to do, but they show you something that makes you realize, helps yourself to get back on track. And it's so much easier than we want to make it. I like how you talk about the cobwebs, because our brain wants to complicate it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because if it's simple and easy, then you could do it right now. And then, oh my gosh, but I'm not ready to do it yet. And so there's a lot of that.
Think of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. And yet it's time to shine. There's this imagery that came up when I was talking with clients almost 2 years ago now. So towards the very beginning of this specific program that I've created. And what showed up for me was the world is on fire, and yet all of the people that are magnetized to my work, that live in the way that you and I live, calling in magic, calling in guidance, calling in beasties, we have practice connecting to an ocean of peace inside of us. And that's what the world needs right now. And we can give it to ourselves first, and then share it with other people, that are ready to receive it. Because of course, not everybody's in a space where they're ready to receive it or interested in receiving it. And that's okay too, free will and choice. But showing all the way up and turning all the way on, and connecting that living out loud and being visible with being in a world that is complicated, but also has a lot of magic and a lot of potential.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I know myself, and maybe other people who are watching, when I connect with that ocean of peace, or I connect with Alice the elephant, and she tells me to share like the most sweet thing, and I do share it, and it feels so good. And then, you're on social media and the next post is, but Trump or whatever, but this horrible, and it's like, it's really interesting. I still have challenges with that because I want to, sort of be connected or to be harmonious with all beings. But I've just learned to sort of train myself to kind of be soft like a feather. Like, I think we're all here to have our own specific voice and not to dismiss what somebody else is upset about. And it doesn't mean that I don't take action on things that I want to set right in the world or in my own space also. But I guess, we're all here to do what we're here to do. And I don't know really where I'm going with that, but I find it, I can wobble. So I have to remember and get back to those trees, because the trees help me to remember why I'm here. And it's to be rooted and to rise up and embrace the challenge of life and the beauty of it.
Yeah. I find that I'm at my best if there are 1,000 people around, if I let it be so that there are 1,000 truths, or maybe even 1,001, and just be in a space where I guide myself and let myself be in charge of what my path is. And then, show up where I'm called to. And I do a lot of teaching in my group, and I try to be really aware of the fact that the work that I'm doing will call to a specific group of people. And then for other people, it might not be appropriate. Like what you were saying about once you've healed. I know that I get people that show up sometimes, and I think maybe it's too soon. Like maybe you need support to work through the trauma that you've experienced. And then after that, come back, and the fiery calls to action, which often emanate from me, will land in a better way. Or maybe there's another teacher, because I have a very activating, kindling the fire inside of people kind of energy. And in our society, Western culture, like some people just need rest. They need a nap and water and a weekend where nothing is asked of them, repeated 52 times.
Yeah, for sure. And I know in my coach training with Martha Beck, we were always sort of taught that, when somebody is recovering from something, like when you came back from Afghanistan, we say you're sort of in that cocoon, you've melted down and completely turned to soup, basically everything. And for me, when I left medicine, went on my sabbatical, I was in a similar thing. I was just in this cocoon, and it's very confusing, and it's dark in there, and you don't know what the hell is going on. And so for anybody to say to you, start taking action steps towards your dreams, it'd be like, oh my God, a nightmare. You can't do that to a person who is in that space, because they need a lot of love. There's so much tenderness and no goading. But once, they get their shamanic healing or however we restore ourselves, it takes time to grieve and to move through all those things. At a certain point, it starts to be uncomfortable that we're not doing something, taking action on our dreams. And then we get irritable for a whole different reason. And that's because it's time to get up off the couch and do something.
I love the way you describe that. And I want in my work to, I feel like you'd share this. I want in my work too to just help locate people with their wisdom inside of themselves, so that way they can integrate what comes in and be in charge of who they are, rather than deferring, for instance, because a lot of the work that I do is around business and marketing, rather than deferring to the latest influencer who has the sexy webinar. You get to decide. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You get to decide, you get to say what feels good. And maybe the latest technique or strategy doesn't feel great. And you get to say, you know what? I don't want to get on stage and offer a talk and get clients that way. I'd rather just write a book. Or groups feel great and one-on-one feels terrible. So I'm going to start there for whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I love that, because then it's sustainable. And meanwhile, you're having fun with whatever it is, pouring your kombucha for your party and, just seeing where that takes you, and beautiful. So what was I going to, I was going to ask you, what's your favorite Beastie lately that you've been, maybe what's a favorite Beastie and what do you admire about them? I always like to ask.
How much time do you have? No, I could take several hours and we could just come back like a week, year. Octopus, actually.
Octopus. Ooh, say more.
I had a client that was talking about how she was just getting this energy. Octopus seemed to be showing up like everywhere. And, you know, what sort of message was it conveying? And then I started to seeing them, which will sometimes happen. I'll get messages for clients, but I thought, no, this is for me. So for me, it's been this kind of luminous, like mystical gaze that's coming from the depths and the bedrock of the ocean, and offering an intelligence that's beyond words, beyond human language. And the seeing, like big S seeing, feels like it's coming through.
Well, what is crazy about that, Steph Lagana, is that last night I had a little huddle with the Life Pirates, who I have a little group of people that I support too. And one of the people brought up the octopus, as it was like a symbol that was, she was experiencing some severe back pain as she was moving through a creative process and resisting the creative process and wanting, anyway. And so eventually, as she talked about it and we kind of worked through a few things, this octopus also had the potential to be huge, and it was also in touch with the abyss. Anyway, so I suggested she check out the Kraken. And because you are a your business, your website is Mythical Enterprises.
Yeah.
I think it just makes sense that we talk about the Kraken. I was just gonna like pull out and let's just read, I don't know what, something from the Kraken.
Oh, and can I say I've had back pain this spring and I've been resisting a lot. So extra thank you. I'm excited.
And for those of you out there who are suffering from back pain, it is, yes, I've experienced something similar. Okay, so the Kraken, what should we read about? Vocation? Yes, let's go for it. There's lots of stuff in here, but there are little sections. So let's just read about vocation, since Steph and I are kind of about helping people find their sacred vocation and finding, you know, being useful in the world in a way that feels good to them and getting supported to do that. So vocation. Some Krakens have eyes as big as dinner plates, and they are said to have excellent vision. Share your vision with key people to move your workplace or its projects forward. If you're a solopreneur, share it with a trusted colleague. So I love that, because I think when we share our vision, for one thing, in shamanic work, we say, you know, we're bringing it to life by, like, you know, using our breath and our voice to bring it out in the world. And the other magical thing is when you tell a supportive person, do not tell a naysayer or somebody who's not supportive. I've done that. It's not a good idea, but sometimes we get tempted. But often you'll get reflected back something, you know, that just happened to be yesterday, which got me, that's kind of what got me doing my 100-day project today. Not in a year, not in 6 months, but today. But talk to, yeah, what does that bring up for you, the Kraken? Or that little bit about connecting with it, sharing the vision?
Oh gosh. Okay. So in 2016, I stopped drinking alcohol, and almost immediately after that had several things where I realized, like, oh, you know, I'm seeing this in a clearer way. Well, the way that it happened was I'd been stopping drinking and restarting, and been stopping and restarting. And one of the people that I'm connected with held the vision for me. I shared with her that I was struggling, and she said, "That's okay, sister. I will see you as sober." And she was someone that had stopped drinking alcohol as well. Wow. And not maybe 2 weeks after that, I came on this resource that was a guided visualization that lets you see your future self, who was drinking and who was not. And it was so profoundly clear for me, like, this is what I'm doing, is I'm not drinking anymore, because for me it was a problem. And it was a mechanism that I used to avoid kind of being in the river of life. And what I realized from her doing that was that she was seeing me energetically as the person who was no longer drinking, big S seeing me. And that through the power of her vision and the force of her will, she was helping me in the path that I wanted. And so from there, I've been taking the power of seeing someone as whatever is their best and brightest, that they feel ready. You know, don't do it without people's consent, but wherever they're ready to go, I've been seeing people step up to make it easier for them to navigate to where they're going. So for me, it's just this reinforcement of the power of being with people who can big S see you and understand where you're being called to go. And it feels really special because I know in a very deep way, I see nature, and you sharing the Kraken makes me think of all the ways that nature looks back and sees me.
Yeah. Ooh, good one. Yeah, well, so awesome. Thank you so much, Steph, for coming. And please tell people about your group and where people can find you, who need this kind of support or are curious to learn more about what you're up to.
Yeah, I would love anyone who feels the click of energy, the hell yes in their belly, just to pop in. I have a Facebook group called Your Sacred Craft, and I'm over on Instagram and on a podcast at Your Sacred Craft. I have my fun website over at mythicalenterprises.com if you want to see pretty pictures of me and big cats, because I love cats. And I just want to reflect back to you that being able to engage with your work in the world and meet these beasties in this multi-dimensional way has been the coolest fucking thing. So thank you for choosing to show up. I can't wait to see what comes from your 100-day project.
Thank you. I'm super excited too. And maybe one of you will want to do a 100-day project. If you do, send me a message because I want to know what it is. So thank you, Steph. And I'll put all the links up there somewhere. Thanks for watching, guys.